If you're standing in the music store aisle or scrolling through endless listings and wondering, is the Casio Celviano PS450 actually good for me? Who should skip it? And does it justify the price for a normal, everyday buyer? That's the exact question I asked myself before I even touched the keyboard. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Buying a digital console piano isn't like grabbing a pair of headphones. You're committing to an instrument that will sit in your living room, take up a corner of your home office, or become the centerpiece of a teaching studio. The hesitation comes from three places: the feel of the keys, the authenticity of the sound, and the risk of paying premium money for something that sounds great through a pair of headphones but falls flat when you actually play a piece for a friend. I spent a few weeks watching video demos, reading the spec sheet, and listening to the built-in speakers in a couple of friends' apartments. What emerged was a picture of a piano that tries to bridge the gap between an entry-level keyboard and a full-size acoustic, and the trade-offs are surprisingly clear. First, let's talk about the audience that will get the most out of this instrument. If you're a serious hobbyist who has outgrown the lightweight, synth-style keyboards of your teenage years, and you want a weighted action that mimics a real grand, the Smart Hybrid Hammer Action is the headline feature that will make you sit up. The keys have a graded weight, meaning the low notes feel heavier and the high notes lighter, just like an acoustic piano. That makes practicing scales and arpeggios feel more natural and reduces the shock to your fingers when you finally transition to a real concert grand. It's also a solid choice for a home teacher who wants a dependable feel for students without the maintenance headaches of a wooden instrument. In my own practice sessions, I found the action responsive enough that I could play Chopin's nocturnes at a moderate tempo without the keys feeling mushy or overly stiff. If you live in an apartment, have thin walls, or need to practice late at night, the built-in 40-watt 4-speaker system is louder than many of its direct competitors. The speakers are positioned to fill a small to medium room, and the sound projection is surprisingly even. I set the APS 450 up in a bedroom that doubles as a studio, and the piano could be heard clearly across the room without the need for an external amp. That matters when you're playing for a family member who wants to hear the nuance in a Beethoven sonata, or when you're live streaming a casual performance and need the piano to carry over the webcam microphone. Now, let's be honest about the practical weaknesses. The speaker system, while generous for its size, still has limits. If you try to crank it up for a small gathering or a semi-public performance, you'll start to hear a slight tinny edge in the low frequencies. In a larger living room or a rehearsal space, the piano will need external amplification to fill the space convincingly. The tone library, at 26 built-in sounds, is decent for a console piano but feels a bit narrow if you're a composer who likes to experiment with electric piano, organ, or string ensemble patches. You can't just scroll through 100 different voices. You're essentially limited to classic piano tones, a few electric pianos, a harpsichord, and a handful of strings and organ sounds. For most players, that's sufficient, but it's a point to consider if you want a multi-instrument workstation. Another practical trade-off is the pedal feel. The APS 450 comes with 3 standard pedals, and while they function reliably for sustain, soft, and sostenuto, they lack the nuanced resistance of a true piano damper pedal. In a professional recital setting, the subtle feedback you get from a grand piano's pedals can affect phrasing, and you'll notice the difference. That said, for day-to-day practice and casual performances, the pedals do the job without getting in the way. Bluetooth connectivity is where the piano feels modern. You can pair it with a phone or tablet and run piano learning apps, backing tracks, or even stream your own recordings directly to the speakers. I tried it with a popular sight reading app, and the latency was negligible, less than 1/10 of a second, so the timing stayed tight. This makes the APS 450 a handy companion for self-guided lessons, especially when you're on a budget and don't want to invest in a separate audio interface. Let's talk price and value. The Celviano line sits a notch above Casio's entry-level models, and the APS 450 typically lands in the